All right, okay, we are back. We're doing podcasting again. Remember podcasting? That thing that I used to do a while ago, and we're back doing podcasting again. So in this episode, I want to talk about why we're now podcasting again and why it's part of our strategy to scale our company to $1 million a month. And one of the really big things that I wanted to talk about in this episode is just how I love this medium. You know, if you're a podcaster and you've already done this before, you'll know what I'm talking about here. But if you're a business owner, you might not understand. When you sit down and you do a YouTube video, you have to be really structured in how you create the content. You've got to be really intentional with your hook. You've got to be really intentional with the topic you're talking about. You've got to make it very dense, very valuable. Because, video retention is terrible. 2% of people watch a video all the way through. Whereas podcasting, like 80% of the people that click play are going to listen to the whole episode. And so getting back to podcasting is going to be a huge thing that I know is going to propel our company just like massively over the coming months. But I want to talk about why today. And specifically, I want to talk about some of these like weird choices that we're making when it comes to how we're, going through and doing content. Because a lot of you will have heard me talk about in my business before, don't be on social media. It was like a hallmark of what we talked about in our strategy. I was like, hey, to build $1 million business, you don't need to be on social media. You don't need to be doing all of this different stuff. You can literally have a podcast episode that goes out on somebody else's show, not even your own show, and you can email people and you can build a really healthy business. And that is still 100% true to this day. But you know what? We've done that and we're now growing the business to the next level. And one of the big things that we're realizing is that in order to get the business to the next level, strategies have to change and things have to change. And I want to address that in this business and kind of lay out the entire thought process and thinking behind what's shifting. Now, if you don't know who I am, my name is Jamie Atkinson. I'm the founder of needaguest.com, where we help people inside of our media firestorm process to grow and scale, typically working with businesses that are doing minimum $500K a year, all the way up to businesses doing, $7, $8, $9, $10 million a year, to help them get more exposure and really to create a literal media firestorm. And that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about why we are now creating a media firestorm, because it is not lost on me that our brand has been built around this concept of the media firestorm, yet we don't put out a lot of media. It's like not been lost on me. So I want to talk through just very high level, about where we are today. I also want to talk about why we're not doing a big podcast launch. Now, if anybody knows about my past, from 2019 till 2023, we actually had a business that was designed to help people launch podcasts into the top 100 charts. So I'm really familiar with podcasting. I've had 3 top 1% podcasts that have all got into the top 100 charts. One of them got into the top 10 charts of marketing. We're really good at launching podcasts. And we're not really doing a launch for this podcast. Why? Well, one of the biggest reasons is that the goal of this podcast is not to get giant viewership. The goal of this podcast is to help customers that are already coming in through our marketing channels to understand more about who we are and what we do and how we can actually help them inside of their business. A podcast primarily is a nurture tool, not a lead generation tool. And so that's really important to understand, because everything that I'm about to map out in terms of the strategy that we're doing to help us get to this higher level in business isn't about quote unquote generating leads. It's about convincing customers that have already found us that we are legitimate and that we know what we're talking about. So let me give you a benchmark blueprint of where we are today as a company. So right now, we've been sending significantly more outbound marketing than any time in the past in terms of where we've been at in our company. We've been doing around about 3 million cold emails per month. And if you're not familiar with a cold email, it's where we use a pretty sophisticated system that we built in-house to basically send out emails to people that have never heard from us before, complete cold strangers. And when you do a lot of that, turns out a lot of people are like, who's this weirdo and why should I trust them? And so we do significant amounts of cold email. We have got, past podcast episodes that we've done on other people's shows, but it's not necessarily up to date since we did those a couple of years ago when our business was very different. And we were also targeting a different customer demographic. Back then, we used to sell a lot of businesses doing 100K a year. Now we sell a lot of businesses doing multiple 6 figures a month. And then the other thing that was happening is that we have a very strong back-end selling system. We call these back-end profit playbooks when we install them with customers. For example, we send daily emails. We do a really good job once somebody's in our world marketing to them. But if you're just a stranger coming in and you've never heard of us before, you can't find anything about us online. And so part of what we've been implementing is this new sort of approach to basically expand out the effectiveness of our marketing, get more bang for our buck, and basically help customers during the research phase. Now, if you think about this, when a customer comes in and books a sales call with you, they have a level of interest that they need to get to in order to be able to make a purchasing decision. You know, if they're coming in and you've just cold emailed them or you've put an ad in front of them, they might be kind of like curious, but it's not a lot of level of interest beyond that. You know, the second level might be after they go from curious, they're actually now relatively interested. Then they get, persuaded and convinced, okay, this looks like it might be the right thing. And finally, they become convicted in the process, and usually sales happen after that point. And so our whole goal here is to raise the interest levels of customers coming in, and we need to create front-end traffic assets that are actually going to help to do that. We call these front-end exposure systems. What can we put in terms of systems in place that's going to get us more exposure on the front end and ultimately get those people being, more sold on what it is that we do? And so there's a couple of different strategies we've deployed, and podcasting is one of them. So let me break down like all the stuff that we're doing. So first of all, I'm committing to making a solid piece of content every single day. You know, many of you have gone through programs like 75 Hard, where you commit to doing something on a streak and you do it every single day. I'm writing an email every day. I'm recording a piece of content every day. I'm writing a new sort of ad creative for cold email, a new cold email ad creative every single day. And through doing that action, I'm going to be able to create a significant amount of front-end traffic assets that are really going to just help us to convert more people and help them know, like, okay, this is who this person is and this is what they do. And so from a strategic top-level perspective, what we've got right now is messaging that converts people. You know, we send a cold email, we do a podcast episode, they, receive an email from us. When they receive these emails or they've heard about us from a podcast and they're in our world, we drive them to book a call on the calendar. When they go onto that calendar, we then send them a few extra emails. We give them some value on the confirmation page, and they have a sales conversation. That's our standard conversion process right now. What we want to do is we want to recognize that that process works to a degree, but there are a lot of people that are falling out of our conversion bucket. You know, of 99% of the people that we're reaching out to aren't taking us up on what's going on inside of this process. They're falling through the bucket. And so what we want to try and do is to stop as many people falling out of this bucket as possible by creating some of these front-end traffic assets. So we're primarily putting out a multitude of different forms of content. One is we're doing 2 YouTube videos every single week, and we're paying about, $4 or $5 a month for a YouTube company to come in and help us edit and make sure the quality of those is really high. And so step number 1, we're putting out YouTube content that goes through the 4 different elements that we actually talk about inside of our media firestorm process. 1, we help people get booked on shows, give them access to our top 1% network. 2, we help people a lot with those sort of front-end exposure systems, things like our email matrix to make more sales, how to build really great magnet VSLs, like the lead magnets that go into video sales letters. Basically stuff we do that gets front-end exposure. The second thing that we really help people a lot with is actually those back-end profit playbooks, like implementing things like best practices for confirmation page, taking clips from a podcast episode to answer key questions that customers have, and even deploying things like we have like a fire hose ad strategy where we just get as much content, down people's throats before they actually come onto a sales call, so they actually have a good chance of consuming content, from retargeting ads. And so when we deploy these different elements of what we do inside of Media Firestorm, we want to make sure that 1, people know what they are, 2, people give a fuck about what they are, and 3, people think they're valuable. And the best way to show somebody that something's valuable is to help them with it, right? And so we're doing those 2 YouTube videos every single week to really put out those examples. Okay, here's how we can help you inside of Media Firestorm. And then the second thing that we're doing is podcast content. Now this show, the Media Firestorm show, I think I'm going to call it the Media Firestorm show. I'm actually recording this before I've even decided how I'm going to put this out. is really going to be just us doing a more conversational style, talking through what we're doing in the business, what we're doing with clients, and really just sharing, the lessons that we're learning along the way, and really helping you to see behind the scenes of some of these different content in a more conversational style. So, we got the 2 YouTube videos, and then we've got the Media Firestorm podcast itself. Now, the reason that we're actually doing a Media Firestorm podcast in the first place is so that, we can put this content out on a YouTube channel, we can put it out on podcasts, but it's actually for a multitude of reasons. One, we want to make sure when people Google us, that if they Google, is Media Firestorm legit, this podcast is going to come up and they can go and listen to some of our content and see, okay, this is what they're all about. Similarly, one of the things that's really interesting is that now with Google search and ChatGPT and other language models, a lot of content is being pulled in for these language models and giving people advice. So if you Google, is Media Firestorm legit, or is NeedAGuest.com a legit company, sometimes there's going to be content pulled into that language model that's got absolutely nothing to do with our company. So we need to put out content online so these language models can go scrape through it and actually get relevant information. So 2 YouTube videos a week, 1 podcast a week that's going to be going out for Media Firestorm. Now, the other thing that I'm also doing, and I don't know how soon I'm going to launch this, is that we're doing a hotline show. So one of my favorite content creators is Dave Ramsey. He puts out an insane amount of content all the time. And what does he do? He just goes live and answers people's questions. Right now, on one of our sort of back-end profit playbooks that we run is what we call like a founder roundtable. So we get a founder like me, or, if you're a business owner, we get you to do like a Q&A call with anybody that's had a sales call in the last 7 days. And let me tell you, those Q&A calls, when I'm like in the fire with it, answering questions from customers and like just really helping them to figure out how to grow their business, some of those calls are absolutely amazing. Like we have some really, really, really good high quality content that goes inside of there, but we never publish it. And so I basically want to take that format of me helping people and answering their questions and put it into a hotline show where we're going to have, a big long form, YouTube podcast content episode, and then we'll break it up into highlighted clips from them. And so again, just to be really clear here, we've got, 2 YouTube videos a week, 1 Media Firestorm podcast a week. I'm probably going to do another podcast for our separate company called Leads.com. And then we've got, the Hotline podcast. And so that in itself is going to be 5 hours of content that we're putting out every single week. And a lot of this content is going to be able to be repurposed in different ways once we have some more money to deploy for team members, that can make it a little bit more leverageable, a little bit more scalable. And so putting out all of this different content and being really committed to the content game is a necessity for a business that runs in this space with any type of advertising, in my opinion, to get to, $10 million plus. One of the things that Alex Mosley talked about when he was originally starting Gym Launch is that, they surveyed all the customers that bought from Gym Launch, and something like 67 to 80% of customers that bought said that they had consumed content. And so anytime you're deploying significant amounts of advertising dollars to promoting your business, you need to make sure that you've got subsequently as much media as possible that people can go through to figure out, can I trust this individual? And so podcasting is becoming a really big part of our strategy. Now, that's just creating the content, right? That is, not dissimilar to how, I'm also going to be going on other podcasts every week, by the way. Like that's another way, another couple of hours on top of that of content we're creating every week. Now, when we've created the content, that's one thing, but how you use the content is another thing entirely. And so one of the things that is really, really important to understand about the way that you deploy your content inside of your marketing funnels is really just trying to figure out how can you get more conversions. So a really good example of this is right now we send a daily email. And we have a lot of people who come on our list who have never booked a call. And then you've got some people who have booked calls. Now, imagine every single person that you ever tried to sell into your business came through a call funnel, direct to calendar, right? You got them on the calendar, you went and chatted through. If you gave them a different way to buy, do you think other people that didn't buy through the first funnel might buy through the second type of funnel? Well, absolutely, because there's different types of people. You got audio people, you got kinesthetic people. And so one of the things that we're doing inside of this process is making sure that through our content, but also through our funnel, that we're deploying different conversion assets to be able to get people over the line. So for example, this podcast will put out some podcast content that's going to break down exactly what we do inside of our offer. Similarly, we've got a direct to calendar. We call it a minimum viable calendar. It has a really high throughput of people who click on it, who actually then go in to book a sales call. And so if right now you're having a complicated video sales letter or a webinar and you don't have a lot of high call volume, actually having a minimum viable calendar is a really effective strategy to get more throughput. Similarly, we've been running a minimum viable calendar. Us adding in another conversion mechanism like a simple video sales letter, which just explains in 6 or 7 or 8 minutes exactly what we do and the way the systems work, could also be another really powerful strategy for us to deploy. And so step 1 is, okay, we need to create these content assets. Step number 2 is we're actually going to make sure that we're deploying more conversion assets, so more ways that people can go through a buying process. So a couple of things that we're adding in our business is we're adding in a video sales letter. We're going to add in a written document which goes through and tells you exactly what our offer is and how it works. We're going to add in podcast breakdowns. We're going to add in a once a month webinar that we're going to do to really get more people converting through a different format, something that's a bit more interactive. So step 1, you've got these front-end traffic assets. Step 2, you've got more ways for customers to convert. And then step number 3 is that we want to use our back-end profit playbooks to really make sure that we are selling more customers using the content. And so a really good example of how we're going to be deploying this extra content is through some of the materials that we've got in the back end. So step number 1, one of the back-end playbooks that we have is a confirmation page. When people book for a sales call, they land on a page that explains what's going to happen next. Now, us being able to put YouTube content or us being able to put podcast clips, we call these breakout podcast clips where we've done, maybe an episode with somebody else and it explains a certain element of our offer, right? With, verifiable proof on it from somebody else validating us, is a really great way that you can actually get more back-end profit, more people going through that sales process. On top of that, one of the things that we're going to deploy really soon is our Firehose strategy, which is essentially taking these 15 to 30 clips that we've done on other people's shows and podcast episodes and even YouTube clips, and basically retargeting people that are in that buying frame with as many of those ads as possible. And so these different strategies that we deploy, 1, front-end traffic assets, 2, more conversion assets, and 3, more back-end profit playbooks. When we put these 3 things together, what we're actually able to generate inside of the business is a lot more throughput. Now, what's really interesting is that those 3 elements are the bits that we can control. What you can't control is what happens with the customer in between. So a really good example, imagine that you do a podcast show on somebody else's show. And you do a call to action. You say, hey, go get my cool thing, right? Maybe they Google you, they Google your name. What are they going to find, right? There's an element of before somebody even comes into your world for the very first time, that they are going to go look and try and figure out, who the hell is this person? Like, are they legitimate? A lot of people will just go take you up on it, right? Those are the high risk people. But there are some people who are, less certain than those high risk people, and they're going to go look for some evidence that, okay, is this worth my time, right? Now, the second thing that's going to happen is that someone's going to come through some of your conversion assets. They're going to come through your VSL, or they're going to come through your minimum viable calendar, or whatever you've got that converts people. And then what's going to happen is that they're going to book in for a sales call, and they're going to have a varying level of interest depending on how much they've consumed beforehand. Now, I want you to think for a second about somebody like Alex Hormozi, right, that puts out hundreds of thousands and literally so much content, right? Huge production engine. When somebody goes to book a call for his offer, what do you think the level of interest is in comparison to, when you put out a cold ad to somebody for the first time? Well, your cold ad is maybe going to have someone that's just kind of curious, whereas somebody that's going to one of Alex's Vegas events in person is probably going to be pretty goddamn convicted that this is going to be what they want to do. And so the difference between there is just the level of consumption. The people that are going through Alex's funnel in that example have consumed hundreds of hours of content. And so the question isn't, how do we do more marketing? The question is, how do we get people to consume more content that's already in our process? And so I wanted to break this down because this is fundamentally quite different, to what we've done before in the past. Before, to get to the business to, the $1 million run rate and higher, and now we've done, significantly more than that, which is great. We had to be very focused. It was about having one offer, one way that we actually got customers to book, one conversion mechanism, and one price point. And now actually, as we are looking to scale up to an 8-figure company, there's just more that needs to be happening simultaneously. You need to have more ways that customers can see you. You need to have basically consistency across your messaging. To get to the $1 million range was all about the rule of ones. It was about creating a clear message for what you can do. And now to expand and get beyond to the next level is really about going beyond that. It's creating consistency in that messaging. And so this is what we're helping a lot of clients with inside of Media Firestorm now, is really just looking at these 4 different elements inside of their business and going a little bit deeper into it and really helping them. And so, for example, I was writing down earlier on my laptop the 4 different elements that we group, our back-end systems into. So inside of Media Firestorm, we've got, SOPs and frameworks and processes that we help our clients with. And they're all broken up into kind of 4 main categories of how we help people. Step number 1 being, okay, step 1, we're actually going to help you get more traffic. So we're going to plug you into this top 1% podcast network so you can record podcast interviews with great shows. And yeah, that gives you warm traffic, but it also gives you this content that you can use to nurture people, which is what we've been talking about in this episode. Step number 2, well, now that you're getting traffic or you've got some kind of traffic coming in, you want ways that you can get more front-end exposure. And so we call these front-end exposure systems. Essentially, how do you get more exposure? How do you get more throughput to your different conversion assets? And so those are things that we have, like our daily email metrics. It's also things like, we have different lead magnet processes we get people to go through. We also have ways that we repurpose podcast episodes, like on YouTube channels or into highlighted clips and things like that. And so once you've got access to the podcast and the traffic, and the second thing you've got is access to those front-end exposure systems, the third thing we're doing is making sure we've got those conversion assets in place, the stuff we were talking about earlier, making sure that we've got more ways that customers can buy from you than just one, way that you've got set up that's doing a reasonable job. And then finally, once you've got through all of those 3 pieces, we focus on the back-end revenue multipliers. These are the profit playbooks that we talk about. How can we basically generate more back-end sales and increase the likelihood that customers are going to transact with you? So that's a little bit of a behind the scenes. This is why we're back doing podcast episodes. If you're enjoying this, let me know. I mean, you can reach out to me on Instagram at Jamie Atkinson. Just shoot me a DM or a message. It's my personal Instagram. I don't use it for business. Just let me know, do you like this new format that we're going through? The podcast episodes here are going to be a bit more conversational. The YouTube videos are going to be a bit more edited. The hotline is going to be us answering questions directly. And overall, when we go on other people's shows, it's going to be a little bit of a different format. But I'm really excited for this new direction that we're going in the business. This is a great way for me to document right at the beginning of this process what we're doing. And, for anybody that's listening that's also, maybe just getting to the 7-figure level, or maybe they've got a business that's doing multiple 7 figures, the biggest thing I can tell you is that, from surrounding myself with a lot of businesses doing $1, $2, $3, $5 million a month, really higher level businesses than where we are today, the biggest thing that I can see is that they just execute with certainty, with a high level of speed. And so in the past, it might have taken me a significant amount of time to even put out one piece of content. Whereas today, I can put out 5 to 10 pieces of content every single week without really breaking a sweat and still do my everyday job. It's not more time that I'm working, but I'm working with a higher level of certainty and a higher level of direction, and my speed to taking actions is increased significantly as I've aligned my mindset with being an 8-figure operator. And so, even if you aren't yet at an 8-figure business level, it's a great idea to actually adopt a mindset of being an 8-figure operator so that you can execute at a higher level inside of your business and deploy your systems in a more, streamlined way. So hope you enjoyed this. If you enjoyed this and you wanted to find out more, please feel free to subscribe to the show. You can also check us out on YouTube. And if you're listening to this episode and you want to learn more about Media Firestorm, just go into the show notes. You can find a link to apply to work with us. And we're excited to help you get to the next level inside of your business and scale, hopefully, to, the higher levels that you're hoping for. All right, guys, take care. We'll see you on the next episode.